Ray Dalio is an American billionaire investor and hedge fund manager at Bridgewater Associates. Dalio is considered one of the world's greatest innovators. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with the news.
Well, what I was referring to is that the conflicts that we have internally between the left and the right, and those who have and those who have not, also get elected populists, and then we also have international tensions. And so when we had the Smoot-Hawley tariff, and we had Japan rising as a power, Germany rising as a power, in much the same way as China's rising as a power, we had a situation where there were economic rivalries out in Asia. Mm-hmm. And so 1931 was when the Japanese invaded Manchuria, and that they started to compete with resources. And that took 10 years, but 1941 was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. I'm saying that you're in a situation where also we have rising powers, China's a rising power, competing with the United States, and those tensions get carried forward there. And those are economic tensions of paramount importance. But those economic tensions produce conflicts in various ways, and that everybody should be cautious about.
How'd the stock market do in 36 to 39? Not too good.
Not too good. Fell over 50%.
What's your current market commentary for?
I don't think it's. I don't think it has anything like that.
Okay.
I think.
But overall, in general, how are you feeling? Are we? Is it fairly valued?
Right now, we have just gotten to the point, in my judgment, that it's more than the risk return is more negative. That now we've gotten Phil. We used to have a lot of. We talked at Davos.
At Davos, I remember you said that stay in, but you weren't real comfortable, but you said stay in this.
There was a lot of cash on the sidelines.
Yeah.
A lot more of that cash has been deployed. We had the benefit of the corporate tax cuts behind us. Yeah. And if we look at what's being discounted is about right. In other words, if you look at the projected returns of equities relative to cash and bonds, the projected returns look sort of about right. But the upside is a little bit is limited relative to the others.
Meaning you would pull money out of the market, or you just wouldn't deploy capital?
Right now, whatever is more defensive, I would then be in a more defensive posture. Whatever your strategic asset allocation issue is, that you know what your strategic mix is. Right. I would be less aggressive rather than more aggressive.
He remembers what he told us in Davos, because I remember, and you remember too. You don't give that many interviews, I think, so you know exactly what you said. But that is accurate too. I was going to mention that you weren't. I wouldn't call you rampantly bullish, but you said this is good and things are going to get better. But you had concerns even then. But the end of the cycle.
I have concerns over a 2-year time horizon. Yeah. If I was to take now and think over the next 2 years. That's where my concerns are. I'm not excited about
where we are in 2 years. Could we consolidate for 2 years and stay here at these levels?
I think more than likely we'll be in these general vicinities for a while.
Okay.
But as time progresses, the risks increase.
Okay.
What do you think the Fed should do right now?
I think the Fed should make sure that it doesn't raise rates faster than is discounted in the curve, right? Because there's an interest rate curve that calculates how fast rates are going to rise. That rate curve is priced into all asset classes, into bonds, stocks, everything else. And so they should make sure that they're not quite as fast as the curve or equal to the curve, because asset prices are very sensitive.
I think that was something you said as well.
I was going to ask you about China. I consider you a bit of a China-phile, someone who spends a lot of time there and knows the people there. What do you think is going on in their economy? There seems to be a lot of debate and discussion.
You mean about what? About the debt restructuring, about the tariffs, about what?
All of it.
And trade. Yeah.
I think that the actual size of the tariffs and trade on the Chinese economy is not that big a deal. And that, there's the 500 billion that they export. There's the size of that. They've got a giant economy and they can handle those types of things. So I don't think it's that big of a deal for them. I think the big deal is what the nature of the relationship is. Is this going to be a relationship in which there's sort of the give and take, or is this going to be an antagonistic relationship? I think that's almost a war-like relationship. I don't think they like the term trade war as distinct from trade negotiation or dispute.
You think it's war-like?
I think that that it is an exchange of painful acts and an intimidation kind of thing, rather than a negotiation of, what do you need? How can I help you? How can you help me? So I think it's gotten on a footing that I think is discomforting to Chinese.
But there would be
officials.
people here who would say it's gotten uncomfortable because in this relationship negotiation that we've had to this point, Americans have fared less well. At least that's the perception in a lot of places. Do you think that's accurate? And is there a way to be a tougher negotiator without maybe ruffling the feathers quite as much?
Oh yeah. I think tough negotiations, nobody is against tough negotiations. Every country understands that it needs to
It's the rhetoric.
It needs to do what's best in their country. But the question is, I think the real issue of China, a leader in China described it as follows. He said, in the United States, that unit that matters the most is the individual. You are a country of individualists. You protect individual property rights in a certain way. If you understand our mentality, we are a family. In other words, the word country in China, in characters, is state family. And he says, when we run the country, we think about how you, a head of a family, would run the family. So it's very much more from a top down. It's very much more hierarchical. So the notion of China Inc., in other words, of course, there's almost a pyramid, and they think at the head of the family, at the head of the government, they think, what is best for China and my Chinese companies? And so that approach, very much different from our approach, which is this bottom-up. And it redefines so many things, how we handle data, how we handle each other, and so on. That's a very structural, important difference. It works for them. And so their notion, will you have the state-owned enterprises being helped by the government?
What stage are they in?
And how will you compete in that?
What stage are they in terms of the six stages?
The most important thing about debt is whether the debt's denominated in your currency or a foreign currency. Right. If it's in your currency, you can manage it, just like we managed it. You spread it out and you move it around and you monetize some of it.
Right.
In their case, the debt is denominated in their currency, most of those currencies. So they're going to be able to manage that, I think, well. And their corporate debt levels are high. They're going through the restructuring. But generally speaking, their debt levels are not as high as ours. And one of the great things is that they're doing it before a crisis. We do it in a very reactive way. And in their particular case, they know that they've got a debt situation and they're in the process of managing it. I think that they'll manage it just fine. I think they'll manage their economy just fine. I don't think we're going to have any big, there'll be bumps along the way. There'll be recession, slower growth, a little bit of that. But I think China will be, I think the big issue is our relationship with China over a period of time. I hope it doesn't follow a path that is very similar to the U.S.-Japanese path, where the economic tensions, the competing for trade routes, the competing for influence in different countries and all that, leads to an antagonism, leads to embargoes and so on.
Two final quick questions. One on policy, which is $21 trillion in debt in our country. Do you think that we can ultimately manage that? That's one of, people talk about too big to fail. Now that was in the context of banks. Now people talk about it in the context of the country or municipalities or cities.
I think that's exactly right. While we don't have an immediate debt rollover like in the next year or two, we have a giant squeeze that's happening. And it's not only because of the debts, but even more important, the unfunded pension liabilities.
And that's when
and the healthcare costs. And so we have a squeeze that's emerging. We will, in 2 years, have the fiscal stimulation that we have pass, and we are going to be selling bonds, a lot more bonds to the rest of the world. We are a reserve currency, and because we're a reserve currency, we're in the very privileged position of having other countries want to save our currency and buy our bonds. But that is going to be risked by the quantity of debt that we're going to deal with.
Given that you've seen how policymakers have responded to crises, how would you grade Hank Paulson, Tim Geithner, and Ben Bernanke? I'm going to see them tomorrow at the Brookings Institute. when you look at given the populism and all the issues that you've raised about where we are today?
A or A plus. I'd give them A or A plus. I mean, like I really do think one could theoretically say you could have anticipated. We were able to anticipate it by doing these pro forma financial numbers and so on. But actually, who did? Now, raise your hand if you did. Hardly anybody did. So, but once that point happened and they were operating in that political environment, the actions that they took, the speed at which they dealt with, all of that led to the results that we now have. So, yeah, I think they did a great job.
Is there any income inequality problem in China that you see?
There's an
what's the bottom 6? Is our bottom 60% better than their bottom? Better off than their bottom 60%?
Their income gap problem is very similar to ours. It's essentially almost the same as ours. Okay. And it's an issue. It's part of the development of the Western provinces and those types of things. But on the other hand, they don't have the same sort of political and social problems of dealing with it. You know?
Yeah, they might deal with it a little differently.
They deal with it a little differently.
Yeah. Right.
Ray Dalio, the legendary leader of Bridgewater, author of the...
Is right about a lot of things, and a lot of things are nuanced. What do you think? Be sure to subscribe to the channel.